Hello, everyone, and welcome. This is Michael Bartlett speaking for EA Zoom today, and I'm excited to be talking about the Wizard Moon, understanding its cares, needs, and magic. Thank you all for coming today. And as you have questions or anything, please feel free to ask, interrupt, or just ask questions. We'll be happy to answer them as they come up. All righty, let's go ahead and move in this. It's fun with all these new little screens to cover. Okay. So yeah, don't look behind the curtain. There's the wizard and the wizardess. So what is a wizard moon? What is it that what gets us into our biggest troubles in life? Our emotional attachments, our projections, our hurts, our family, and our genetics. These are usually the things that really kind of tie us up and bind us in life. And what planet holds all of this in life? It's our moon. What we consider to be the emotional body, the emotional system, the body in the solar system that basically we see as holding our emotions or holding our close senses of feeling. When we think of the tidal waves, high tide and low tide, those are affected by the moon. And so, of course, that's going to also affect the waters that run in our natural bodies. And zodiacally speaking, where is the moon likely to cause the biggest upsets? In which house, in which area of the chart do we think that these are going to occur? It's in the house of the unseen, the house of our undoing. And what happens when we bring consciousness to these places? This is where the wizardry occurs, transmutation and alchemy. It's where we get the opportunity to bring the personal to the impersonal and the impersonal to the personal. It gives us a different way of being in relationship to our emotions. It gives us this ability to see, own, and work with them rather than allowing them to work us. In esoteric astrology, we talk about the moon as being a dead planet. And it's kind of interesting because when you think about it, it's funny, when I first read about this and understood it, I thought, oh my gosh, how could one consider the moon to be a dead planet? But then I think about, what is it that really, that causes us troubles on the personality level on our path to trying to find greater consciousness, becoming more neutral, becoming more balanced in the ways we approach life. And it started to make a little bit more sense to me because the moon represents, of course, our emotional, familial, and biological foundation, programming, and background. Of course, those resonate with the Cancerian areas of life. And these are the areas in which we get hooked. This is the areas of water. This is the ways in which, with the moon ruling Cancer, we think of the moon, of course, as holding the emotions through water. And allowing the energies of the moon to be acknowledged, worked, and resolved or healed gives us the ability to become neutral to these hooks and step off the path of personality and onto the path of spirit. Our sensitivity in these areas of life are deadened and need to be activated. Think about when we get triggered by things in order to address and resolve them. It's those things where we can feel like we've really come far in our lives, and then we're driving along and someone cuts us off on the freeway, and all of a sudden this rage comes through. Or when we're in relationship with someone or going out to dinner and something's spoken that ends up triggering something, it really comes out. And while it can be really unsettling and uncomfortable to people around us and ourselves, the real point is that these come up so that we can deal with them, so that we can resolve them, we can move on. And dead refers to that which is energetically non-regenerative, where we get stuck. If you've heard of life in 5 chapters, I walk down the street, I fall in a hole, it takes me a while to get out. 3 more chapters of falling into the hole happens, and then finally at the end you realize, hey, I want to walk down a different street. I don't want to fall into that same spot. We need to make conscious choice. We need to bring consciousness to our emotional reactive system so that we can act in our lives rather than react to what life presents to us. And while the moon is seen as a dead planet or has no essential value, the moon continues to play the part on the personality level, of course, which is the part that interacts with others on the physical plane. So while it is dead, and while esotericists see it as something that doesn't really, it shouldn't be ruling you, it is, of course, going to inform things, and it's going to be a way that's going to be encountering and working with people when we encounter other people. And if you think about that operating in your 12th house, I like this image. It's St. George and the Dragon. And this is my symbolism of bringing the intellect in to work with the emotions, the raw emotions, those things that rule us, the things that can take us down under and make us fall into a place of being emotionally trapped. And through slaying that, through making these subconscious choices to bring our awareness to these places, this is where we get to make the choice to do something different. So the goal is not to slay, but transform your inner demons and dragons. It's to be in relationship with your lunar nature and allow it to inform you, not to make you an overly emotionally overreactive drama queen. I have a 12th house Scorpio moon, so so I think I know what overly emotionally overreactive drama queen can be. I love this one. It's person A asks, "Damn, are you a newspaper?" The second person says, "No, why?" And this is because there's a new issue with you every day. You know, we get caught up in it, and some of us can become emotional junkies. Some of us can get kind of stuck in this drama of wanting to enjoy these excitements, these things that go on in our lives. And so, you know, some people, you know, especially when we're talking about this for the 12th house, you know, it can be an addiction sort of a situation. And, you know, so we can become addicted to emotional dramas. We can become addicted to soap operas. We can be addicted to Fox News. I hope, oh, I won't get into politics. So where do we find the wizard moon? And I think you've already got a little bit of a hint for it. So I love this quote. The 12th house has a pretty bad reputation in astrology. It is supposed to signify things like self-undoing, imprisonment, secrets in general, secret enemies, seclusion, and generally being withdrawn from the world. And it is usually regarded as being one of the worst houses in the chart. But to be fair, it is also said to signify enlightenment, spiritual retreat, and a very high regard for all things mystical and spiritual. And this lovely quote comes from our dear esteemed Robert Hand. So we can kind of see, you know, we're going to be seeing these themes throughout the talk today, is that, you know, these ideas of self-undoing, this idea of imprisonment, these ideas of things where these problems happen, all occur from a sense of bringing our greater awareness to that which gets us stuck, that which is maybe, you know, come down from family, come down from society, come down from our communities that we grow up in, but whatever that imprinting is. And it's to bring this awareness so we can have a better chance at choosing something different than what we've chosen before, and allowing in the wonderful spiritual, mystical opportunity. And I like to say, through awareness, self-centering, and a neutral, non-reactive approach to life, one grows. Challenges and adversity produce fertile fields for new births. So it'd be nice to have a couple of these images. These are some, you know, we're the crucible. That 12th house is a very sacred place. It's a very, and we're going to get into a little bit more on it, but, you know, it's that place that's just before birth. It's that place where we become transmuted. And so when we become ensouled matter, which is what happens at the ascendant when we're born, we find that we're now carrying, you know, the soul within us, and it's and the emotions, and then the body starts building and all these new things. So, you know, we are the crucible. And once you transmute to the personal, there's space for the spiritual. Spiritual is defined as relating to or affecting the human spirit or soul, as opposed to material or physical things, meaning I'm responsible for his or her spiritual welfare. Or 2, relating to religion or religious belief. I kind of see personally that religion is following others' beliefs, and spiritual people tend to follow our own things. But it, you know, I think one can lead into the other in the path of finding out what that truth is for oneself. And finally, spirituality is the quality of being concerned with the human spirit or soul, as opposed to material or physical things, which is what we said above. The seeking of that which lies all around, through and through. It's kind of like the soup in which we all are floating. So here's our chart for today. I'm in Santa Fe, New Mexico, so I've set it for 5:30. I know it's 4:30 in California, but I don't know if anyone's here from the West Coast. So in explaining what we're talking about when we're talking about the 12th house, so we can make it clear, I like to see the 12th house. I'm a whole sign house user. So the only thing that really changes, and I don't think there's my mouse, the only thing that really changes in the chart is it makes the ascendant a sensitive point within the first house as opposed to the beginning of the first house. But because of that, and because of kind of a little bit of the fluidity of what happens with the 12th, I kind of give a wide stance for how I view the 12th house and how it might show up for people. So first of all, we're going to draw a line from the ascendant to the descendant. I like to see it being everything from the ascendant all the way up to the beginning of the sign before the ascendant. It's kind of, for me, I just find there ends up being a little bit of relevance. I think it's important, like we do with anything in astrology, to ask questions of the person and see, you know, how it's operating, what might be playing out for the person in that regard. Let's see. And if we see it again, I like to see this as the above the ascendant as being the preconscious and unconscious realms, and the after the ascendant being the conscious self, because what is the ascendant after all? But it's actually our birth point. That's when we take our first breath. That's when we are separate from mom. When we take our first breath, and we are embodied, so to speak. So what we're talking about today is this space that's up above it. It's the space before we're born. It's the space. It's you know, the womb. It's the 12th house. You know, Pisces house. So it's ruled by Neptune. It's the transcendental waters. And when we think of it as birth, you know, this is that space from which we all come, and then we manifest ourselves into life. So we're talking about that space just before the liminal spaces. I guess the baby wouldn't have a second birthing. All righty. So the house of the unseen, you know, it can kind of be like a prison. It can lock people up in these traps, these emotional traps, these emotional labyrinths, if you will, in a sense, these places where we don't even understand where we're getting caught in things. For some reason, the cat's being very vocal, so if you hear cat sounds, it's just our cat speaking. She must be really enjoying the topic. The house of our undoing, you know, when we're in jail, you know, if we get caught for doing, say, you know, can be maybe we're abusive, not taking care of people properly. It's just connection is unstable. Okay, hope that straightens out. This is the house where we like to project our needs, our fears, and anxieties onto all that is. And I think, you know, because if the moon's here, there's a real innate desire for mom to take care of it. Whatever one can symbolize as being mom, whether it's one's biological mom, or if one had difficulty with one's birth mom, maybe it's an idea of a transcendental mother, or just the idea of someone coming along to take care of you. And that can be, you know, when one surrenders over one's power and doesn't take care of one's issues and the things they needed to take care of, that can become its own trap. So, Chad, is there a question? Oh, okay, so, okay, perfect, okay, thank you. Yeah, and then also too, because, you know, it's in the 12th house, and, you know, in the picture we did in the beginning with the curtain, you know, it's like, don't look behind the curtain. It's not a moon that really wants to take responsibility. So the thing is, you know, blame mom, blame anyone else, blame whoever you can, so that you don't have to take responsibility for your feelings. But again, that's yet another trap. That's keeping you from really being honest and taking responsibility for your actions. Okay. It can represent our secret obsessions and motivations, especially by sign and by aspect. And what we want to do, the freedom comes from facing this stuff. If it remains out there, one thing that I've really found with working with 12th house placements with people and my own is that we're almost artists at projecting whatever that planet is in the 12th house is typically going to be projected into other people, because it's something that's really kind of hard to own. When one turns around and faces and owns it within oneself, it really becomes a freeing moment. Excuse me. The bars are removed, and take responsibility for all of it. We each have to take responsibility. Our charts, I personally feel, we chose the moment of our birth specifically for the lessons entailed in the chart by aspect, especially the challenging aspects, and I think even the positive and the supportive aspects. You know, we have to take responsibility for all parts of it, and it's ours to own, and it's our archetype that we're here to be on the planet as an expression of the divine, as an expression of a moment in the continuum of the universe unfolding. And what I like to think is, you know, be a liminal walker and share the insights. People with 12th house moons, 12th house planets, we're sensitive beings. We can bring through a lot, and we're going to be going through all that. This is a diagram I like to think. I have 3 planets in Virgo, so I have a little bit of that know-it-all kind of thing. I'm an Aquarian and Sag rising, so sometimes it can be a little bit difficult. But I like this kind of visual because it helps me kind of keep perspective and understanding, and allowing for the mystery and the beauty of life, which is another aspect of this 12th house moon placement and 12th house in general. So what we know of everything, so if you think of everything as being this circle, what we know is about 25% of that circle. You know, we know how to drive a car. We know how to make food for ourselves. We know how to put our clothes on. We know how to do the specific jobs we know how to do, those sorts of things. The second 25% is what we know we don't know. Some of us, you know, we have our very particularized field. Most of us probably know we don't know how to be a brain surgeon or be an astronaut or be any number of things, but we know specifically we don't have those things. So it's really easy. We know that we don't know them. So that leaves us another portion down here, which is the complete bottom half. And it's what we don't know, we don't know. And I think my partner said to me one time, which was really great, he says, you know, or do we? So it's the line that I added to it. Thank you, Rich. You know, especially with this 12th house moon, especially with this 12th house sensitivity, this is a doorway. This is a place of access for deep inner knowledge that is connected with something greater and something divine. So on a certain level, yeah, we don't know. But on a certain level, I think there is an inner knowing that does know. And as we build this relationship, there is that opportunity for being in relationship to that which we don't know and being okay with it, which is another important aspect, of course, with this placement. It's the realm of the unknown, of course. So it's about learning relationship to and with the unknown. I like to say, go within or go without. It's the labyrinth. It's the one path. I mean, it's that thing that we have to really do. If those of us who are here to especially work as facilitators for others, really need to be able to go within and understand these parts within themselves, because without that interconnection, it's really hard to make connection with other. And especially in these places where when we work with people on such deep, intense levels of their lives, people can tell when we've walked in those places ourselves, that we've gone to those depths, that we're not just some idealistic individual with a lot of book smart that is able to read off astrological formulas. When we understand that, you know, that while a person's chart, you know, we can see someone has, you know, nothing but trines and sextiles and is still maybe very unhappy. We can see that there are other things at work in the chart. There are other things that go on. There are other things that go on with the individual. And the damning of prevention, you know, we live in a very outer world society. You know, it's all about being seen. It's a very solar sort of a system. And what I'm talking about here is really kind of a nocturnal, a nighttime kind of a viewing of things, which is not something that has been really embraced by our society for long. But of course, it's starting to become more and more in the consciousness, because we need to bring balance in, and we need to not vilify one aspect, light or darkness, over the other. It is all beautiful. It is all divine. It is all part of all that is. It's like I like to say, you know, if people, you know, with these polarities, then it's like saying, you know, which is bad and which is good, the inhale or the exhale. They're both completely necessary, and we can't live on one side of a polarity. We just can't. So people with planets in the 12th house are deep divers, liminal walkers, relating. And as a liminal walker, the definition of a liminal walker is relating to a transitional or initial stage of a process and occupying a position at or on both sides of a boundary or a threshold. If you think about it, the ascendant and the descendant are really perfect positions. Those are both very liminal spaces. It's sunrise and sunset. You know, if we were to pull up the chart for this, for you know the eastern horizon and the western horizon, where the sun rises and the sunset, not at that moment, but and the people who we find in these areas typically are people like midwives, hospice workers, astrologers, of course, therapists, certain doctors, mediums, sensitives. It's just, and I love this shirt. It's scuba diver. I dive deep. I go deep. That's what 12th house people need to do, and that's what 12th house moons need to understand is they're not ever going to be really satisfied with operating at a superficial level. It's just not gonna be meaningful enough for them, because as we get into what we're going to be talking about as far as some of the care for it, these people would much rather. I know for me, like when topics get a little boring or a little too superficial for me, I'd much rather go and just be by myself. I'd rather just go and recharge than be engaged in, you know, like talking about the weather or, you know, or go Mets or, you know, a sports game, you know, something like that. That's not the space that moves me. And that's what you got to find out with these people with the 12th house is, you know, they can be very deeply passionate about things. They can be very deeply moved by things. And you just got to find out what that is. Knowing their sign, of course, for the 12th house really helps. One of what I found to be a really great resource when I started working with 12th house work was Tracy Marks. She's really, I think she has quite a few planets herself in the 12th house. I think her work is exquisite, very helpful. She states some of the obvious things in here. It's really important for people with 12th house moons to differentiate between one's own feelings and another's feelings. There's an exercise I like to do where I say, put your left hand on your heart and you put your right hand in front of you. And it's really important to realize and say with that left hand on the heart, this is me, and that hand out forward and the right hand facing forward to another person, that's saying you to the other person, and understanding that there's that differentiation between the two people. Because again, you know, we're talking about Pisces house. What does Pisces want to do? It wants to merge. So there's just a way that, you know, it's very easy for 12th house people to lose their boundaries and not be aware that they've that the feelings that they're going on for what's going on. Okay, sorry, I'm just getting some Zoom comments while I'm in the middle of talking, so I apologize. Let's see, okay. And these people tend to be very spiritually inclined and can be quite interested in and adept at the metaphysical. There's, I think, my sense is, my feeling is, with my Scorpio moon there, I mean, it's a feminine sign. It's a water sign. The grandmother was a very important role for me. My grandmother was having that, and then that for me was just a wonderful representation, kind of like the divine or the transcendental mother, or the transcendental feminine, and that love concept. And but what happens a lot of times is because of traumas that are experienced in the life by these people, I really believe that the spiritual metaphysical aspect is something that's really kind of a lifesaver, because there's an understanding on a deeper level that things can be okay and be safe. And the real challenge, again, you know, because we were talking about these emotional hooks and things, the real challenge is in these emotional relationships with other people and experiences, especially, you know, with family, with charged subjects, to be able to continue to hold that space within ourselves. But knowing that there's that safety there and being able to reach out to it and take risks is really an important aspect of this moon as well. Another wonderful book is Elaine Howard. She has a couple different books on the highly sensitive person, and I believe the other one's the highly sensitive person. Okay, I do have that copy. I really highly recommend these books as well. Understanding anyone, especially if they have water 12th house moons, these individuals can be really super sensitive, and we're kind of like energetic sponges, and that's one of the images I have later on. But it's like we can pick up and feel things in the environment, in the area that we have to again make sure that it's ours. And so then also too, then there's this sensitivity and love, and it's, you know, that sensitivity is carried over into clothing. Making sure the clothing you're wearing is something that actually feels really good to your skin, because that's going to feel really nice. Making sure your bedding feels good and comfortable. Making sure that that you're doing these things that really nurture your body and that feel good, and not denigrating yourself or your sensitivity, because there is an exquisite sense of sensitivity with it, and our society kind of wants us to get over that, and we need to find a way to honor that and be in life at the same time, which is very challenging. Yeah, just what I was just speaking to. High sensitivity level on many levels. It's literally the princess and the pea. You know, feeling that bump, feeling that wrinkle in the sheet, and being not feeling good until it's resolved. You know, it's this thing of there's this need for a smoothness. There's a need for almost like, you know, when you think about it in the ocean, it's like those times when the ocean gets to still itself. It's really important for people with 12th house moons. Finding the appropriate therapy. One of the things that that Tracy Marks talked about, which was really great, and it's my personal background is in core energetics, which is built on the work of bioenergetics, which has relationship to EMDR and a lot of other wonderful work, Haikomi and other great stuff. But it's a very cathartic work. It's about moving and feeling these energies. It's about experiencing, expressing rage, expressing anger, expressing feelings, expressing sadness, longing, just really literally expressing and feeling those things, especially as someone who has a 12th house placement, 12th house moon, because the Scorpios, 12th house Scorpio, this 12th house Scorpio is, you know, Scorpio's tough. I like to think of like where the other water signs are a little bit more like a regular egg, the Scorpio egg's a little bit more like an ostrich egg and requires a little bit more of a firm crack, so to speak, to open it up, to break it open and set it free. And can be the cat lady or repeated rescuer of others, but not the self. Again, like we talked about before, it's that projection. The 12th house is a projection house. So it's much easier to go, oh, these cats really need to be helped, than to be able to understand that, you know, that cat lady, maybe for her to understand that she needs to take care of herself. I love image of a chicken or a rooster with sunglasses, and you know, it's just this way with the 12th house of wanting to stay behind the scenes, you know, to be an observer. So there's almost a little bit of a natural observer in that place, but it kind of needs this kind of step back a little bit and kind of look in that kind of sense of that kind of a Scorpio, and it might be just me putting on that with the Scorpio aspect with it, but I just find that there's just a way that the 12th house moon people and 12th house planet people like to maybe get other people to do things, and you know, to maybe not reveal what it is that's going on with themselves and their feelings. And like we talked about before, it's important to build your inner observer. Who is having the feeling? Who is observing? There's a wonderful book called The Untethered Soul. I would really highly recommend it, because it's about finding this way of having a relationship to life. There's, you know, there's so many things in life that really help us to do that, but just to you know, to anything that gives us a sense of space, anything that gives us a sense of being able to be in relationship to something, again, like I said before, so we can choose to act as opposed to react. And there's the clock. The solitary self and the 12th house wizard moon characteristics. An acute need for personal space and alone time. 12th house moon people really need downtime. We can reach a point of saturation, and then it's depending by sign aspect, and yeah, by sign and aspect, what can really kind of tell you how it's going to show up. But when that doesn't get taken care of, it's really not pretty. So I really recommend that these people take time for themselves on a regular basis. There's a shame, and you know, this might be because I see it more because of my Scorpio moon, because Scorpio can be a little shaming sign. there's a shame in it of thinking that one needs to take downtime. And so it's one of those things where it's really great. It's not a luxury, it's a necessity. It's really important. Spiritual practice is really beautiful. It's going to be influenced by element and quadruplicity, just as the personal space time. I think like the water, any of the 12th house water moons, water experiences are really great. Pisces, walking on the ocean. Scorpio, anything that can help melt the cold water, like hot water, steam, something like that's really good. The spiritual practices, when I think of by element and quadruplicity, I think of someone with earth or air doing Tai Chi, someone with maybe a Mars moon or a Mars moon Aries combination or something is moving that, maybe doing fire walking, but really looking at the element, looking at the modality, and determining from those, whether this is going to be more of a sedentary sort of a practice that's good for this moon for working with it, or whether it should be, activated appropriately. And these are really great things to be able to work with your clients and help them to understand better, as well as working within yourself if you have these placements. There are anxieties and fears, especially with the water signs. It's nebulous. These things can come out of nowhere. When you think, it's nice when you think about water, it's really important to think of like when you're in a pool, you can be, or even like in a lake or an ocean, you can be some distance away from someone and someone can smack the water or make a sound in the water, and that water travels really quickly and easily. And so when you think about that with people who have 12th house water moons, they're going to pick up on those things even a little bit more. And it's imperative. And with air signs, it'd be someone, I would think that the air signs would probably be in the place of worrying about things, then there's going to be a little bit more of anxieties, those things that keep us up at night thinking over and over again. The earth signs are likely to have, physical issues that are going to happen if they're not taking care of themselves. And those kind of random aches and pains. And fire, that can end up being, I think a really great thing with them would be like fire walkers would be really great, bringing that up. But as far as anxieties and fears, this with fire, Leo's probably be the thing of, fearing that that no one loves them, no one wants to see them. That'd be the thing that would probably come up for them. And so then the ego has to build up really big to hopefully be seen even more, or is retracted even more. The 12th house has to do with the ancestral line, seeing, with that moon, what's gone on with, I typically like to see the moon as being the mother's lineage, but it's the nurturer. And nowadays it's really important to ask the person, who was the nurturer in the family. So, what you might find is you might see the moon there, and it might actually be the father's line that's coming down through there. What are the issues that are still needing to be resolved from that family? And it could also just be a combination of the two, because each of us is a culmination of our ancestral lines from both parents. And we are here to work on issues that our ancestors have been working on for some time. And we're kind of the product of that. And sometimes that can be really conscious, and sometimes it's not consciously expressed or made aware. Need for safety and security. Again, this goes along with the fears and the anxieties and the need for personal time and space. Boundaries are really crucial. Learning to have boundaries, learning to say no and be able to mean it, and that's going to help build up one sense of safety and security as well, especially if you grew up in a household where that wasn't available. Another characteristic, like I said earlier, is difficulty in asking for help. It can be very self-sufficient. Oh no, I don't need anything, I'm fine. That kind of strong, stiff upper lip sort of thing. And if you can break through that and connect with them, it can be really nice. And of course, this can be adjusted based upon sign, aspect, and consciousness. As we all know, looking at any chart will not give us any ability to understand or see the consciousness of the individual. We don't know when we look at a chart whether we know when someone gives us their birth time and everything, but that could also have been the birth of an animal, an insect, a blade of grass. While all those do have consciousness, I believe personally, it's not going to have the same kind of thing as like what we're talking about here. And also too, of course, it's going to be different levels depending on the individual and where they are in their space in life and on their continuum of existence on this plane. And how is the 12th house moon different than a first house moon or one in any other house? I guess I'm supposed to answer that question. Sorry about that. I think, we've been kind of covering that, that 12th house is, another way to look at that 12th house is it's a culmination. It's a place where everything comes together. If we think about it developmentally, it's that final place where we then kind of birth in new ideas. So, the first house moon is first of all going to be seen in a certain sense, right? Because it's above the horizon. When the person was born, if they have a 12th house moon, that means that moon was rising in the eastern horizon, and is somewhere seen on that side. So it is going to be seen even in spite of themselves. And we have to remember that that whole upper half of the hemisphere of the chart is the outward way in which we see the world, the way the world kind of reflects back to us. And so along those lines, it's going to be kind of a culmination of that actually is taking all that learning and knowing from the descendant all the way over to the 12th house, from the 7th house to the 12th house, building it all together, and then is ready almost for a new iteration, so to speak, a new moon in a sense into that first house, and then going through the new process again. So I like to say the 12th house represents the doorway into incarnation, from nothingness into form, and the point of merging and oneness. If we think of incarnate, it's Latin meaning in the meat, literally. It's when we become ensouled. It's when our soul goes literally into the meat, when the flesh actually becomes energized and enlivened by the soul. Self-perception versus misconception or misperception, which is really important. I mean, from where is it coming? It's really important to learn discernment. And sometimes it's important that we for us to understand and realize that we play literally an emotional role for our friends and families, oftentimes thinking it is them. We can end up having feelings or senses around people. And also I think it's one of those things, having a 12th house moon, that kind of opens other people up in different ways too, because there's just a real different approach to life. It's not done in kind of the standard ways in which we do things. It's a liminal energy. It's taking from the darkness and the light at the same time. So it's kind of like pooling these kind of energies together in a way and mixing them. And not many people are used to seeing things in that way. So, the way that we play our emotional roles, whether it's being the way we express our feelings, or maybe just expressing feelings that we don't know that are ours, and it might end up being someone who's close to us that we're actually expressing them for, who might not have the ability to express them themselves. Oops. It's a purification process. Pisces is ruled by Neptune and Jupiter. Neptune in the modern age nowadays, Jupiter in the traditional sense, in the exoteric chart. And on the esoteric level, Pluto is the ruler of the esoteric. So it makes you kind of think about it. This is all about transformation, acceptance, and transcendence. This is not a personal process. It's really literally learning how to be personal to the impersonal and impersonal to the personal. And that's a real shift in changing one's perception, in one's relationship to things. So that maybe we don't take things so personally, which is not an easy thing for a moon to do, right? A moon takes things personally, regardless of which one it is. An Aries moon is going to feel it as a personal affront. Maybe it's going to feel like an attack, or someone's like banging on the door declaring war. And Taurus is going to take a different approach. Taurus wants to go and get some chocolate and some wine and sit on a nice comfy sofa and maybe read a nice romance novel or make love. It just depends on how we each want to do that. The unresolved and buried emotional issues are likely to be somatized, leading to many diseases, especially ones with roots in anxieties and phobias. So, this idea that we can, it's very much a male thing, and it's interesting because we, Linda, I'm sure you know about this story. We had a wonderful talk the other night here at our home. Someone came and spoke on the topic of Lili in Australia and Ceres, and you know, this idea, this very masculine idea that, oh, you know, just have a stiff upper lip and you know, bury the emotions is going to take care of things. But no, what we find is these things, you know, we get cancers, we get headaches, we get migraines, we get fibromyalgia. I mean, that's a classic sense of things. You know, when these anxieties and phobias don't get resolved, and when the energies in the system aren't being able to produce themselves and release themselves in the appropriate manner, they get locked in the body, and that creates sickness. And the only thing we can do really is to kind of get back into the body, get in relationship with the body with that, because the body's going to tell you what the truth is, and then you can see what it is. But otherwise, it's not pretty going down that path. And it's really important to understand that each of the planets represents a need. Whenever you look at any astrological chart, whenever you look at your chart, it's really important to see that each planet means that it represents a need in your chart. And the moon needs to be safe, it needs to nurture, and it needs to be nurtured. The moon needs emotional relating based upon the elements of the moon. So depending on the type of element, it's going to be the type of emotional relating it's going to need. If it's an air moon, it's going to want to talk about things and observe and think about things and make analysis. If it's an emotional moon, a water moon, then it's going to need to be relating on an emotional level, expressing the tears, expressing the anger, expressing the rage. If it's a fire moon, it's going to need to express whatever it feels in that moment. You know, it's that inspiration, it's that instantaneousness of the fire, of the flame. If it's an earth moon, it might need to just take off its shoes and feel the walk on the earth, you know, pushing our feet down into the earth, into the ground, into the rocks, and feeling the earth, walking on the earth, rolling around in the grass. These are all things that are really, can be really healing for each of the elements. You know, think of each one of those things that can be brought in. Oh, that's funny, I just actually did it, yeah. I went off on my own thing, yeah. Yeah, earth moon also, you know, like a mud bath too, also is really good too. And so when we speak of the moon in the 12th house, we have to ask ourselves the following question. Where is the mother or the nurturer? Where was that in the person's life? Because that usually is also an indicator that nurturing was not really easily obtained or easily seen. And so then the next thing is ask the native how he or she obtained their nurturing, where that came from, what went on. And has the native been able, but you know, the person you're doing the chart of yourself, have you been able to learn to nurture yourself? And or is that projection on other people? Is it much easier for you to project? Therefore, you don't need anything to do, so it's a gift to them. It's real important. And what occurred during the oral stage of development can also be something that can be shown on, you know, was there an issue around breastfeeding? Was there something around you know, getting the actual physical nourishment that is needed? And again, kind of like what saying that able to nurture oneself is, can the native express his or her needs? Because that's really important. And what is a relationship that person has now to their inner child, to their inner sense of that nurturing? Because having all these things, being aware of these different aspects of ourselves allows us to have this dialogue with it, and we can get in touch with these different parts of ourselves and understand what it is that's going on, and not allowing these things to rule our lives anymore, these issues. These are people who are more likely acutely attuned to the emotional nature of people around them, especially those with whom the native has a particularly close relationship rather than their own, meaning that it's much easier for those of us with 12th house moons to pick up on and care for those people around us than sometimes we are for ourselves, as which I've talked about a few times throughout the talk today. And again, this is a deeply feeling place, but also a place of projection of parts we do not want to own. You know, it's much easier to say like, oh, that person over there is the, you know, is the DP, you know, the designated patient. We'll let that person be the problem. And the instinctual moon allows for the wizardry to occur. Once you are standing in that space of absolute centeredness, understanding where you are within all that life is providing, and you can be in touch with your feelings and things, and be in relationship to life, then that's really what the wizardry is, because you're actually allowing yourself to be really truly in the flow of life and to act from a really healthy place again. And so with the 12th house moon, what issues from the mothers? Remember, this can also be the nurturing parent, if not the mother, of course. It can also be grandparent. What is it that needs to be resolved? These are the questions you want to ask, what we want to look at when it goes on for these people. The moon also relates to one of the places where fate overrules free will. It's our genetics. It's that area where what we biologically inherit from our family genetics. So maybe it is a disease that's running, you know, a blood disease that runs in the family, or maybe it's some sort of a thing that is carried on that shows up every few generations. You know, those sometimes can actually show up. We can kind of see those in the chart from time to time. But you know, that is a part of where we experience fate, isn't it? Is in our biology. We don't really have free will in relationship to what our biology is. It's kind of intact, although we're now living in this magical time where scientists are able to manipulate our DNA and do other things so that you know, we are actually starting to change that. So I'll be interested to see what happens over the next while. And then what is the relationship with the more emotionally tethered side of the family? It could be another way to look at it. You know, my personal family was kind of like, my mom and dad were kind of like my big fat Greek wedding. One side of the family was very emotionally centered, very, you know, very watery in a sense, and the other, and my father's side of the family is very air, you know, very thoughtful, very Northern European in their approach to things. And so, you know, it's you know, looking at which side of the family is probably the more emotionally sided. You know, that can kind of give you an indicator too of which side that part is playing out. And while there is an edict to heal that which came before, not everyone, let's see, not every 12th house lunar type will truly activate their wizard moon traits and transmute. You know, it's not, while there is the desire, you know, that people have, sometimes literally we do get stuck, and this is a 12th house. And as I said before, you know, this can also be the place where we get stuck in prison, where we might get caught in a serious drug addiction or other sort of situation in which we are trapped and unable to really, you know, move forward in the ways we do. But then the thing would be like, what is being accomplished in that place of being trapped? Because I would think that would still be something that the person's still trying to work through. I have the little picture of medium Alexis Arquette, a great show that was on NBC for a while, which kind of was irritating to me all the time, because after the second or third season, when her husband and other people would doubt what she was saying, I just kind of like would go like, are these people idiots? Haven't they been paying attention to how right she is all the time? Or maybe they weren't showing how the time she was wrong. I don't know. But you know, there's a real strong mediumship aspect with the 12th house. The liminal spaces are thin. You know, there's a reason why we talk about dawn and dusk being these times of day when the veil is thin and we're able to bring things through. And this is, you know, something that's obviously true with the 12th house. And I love this with Charlie Brown. My anxieties have anxieties. That's a very 12th house situation. And in our society, what we do nowadays, unfortunately, rather than, you know, being told, hey, you know what, go off and see a shaman, or go off and do a walkabout, you know, go off and, you know, find these parts within yourself, see a therapist, do this work that you need to do, just pop a pill. And the issue is nowadays is these pills do not resolve the problem. They're just taking care of the symptom. And the symptom isn't the issue. The symptom is showing you that there's an underlying problem that's creating the symptom. And that's what one needs to address, is the underlying causality, so that one doesn't have the symptomology any longer. Yeah, take that big pill. All righty. So how to live life without being rolled over by the waves and crushed against the rocks. Learning to say no. It's learning to have boundaries. It's learning to take care of oneself, valuing oneself, learning that if one doesn't take care of oneself, one is of no value to, is of value to no one else. I didn't want to get too many negatives in there. If we, those of us who take care of so many things and so many people, if we don't take care of ourselves, then that means that those people and those things that we're taking care of aren't going to be able to be taken care of. So it's really important to learn to do things and to take care of them, so you aren't rolled over. You aren't rolled over by people's demands. You aren't rolled over by people's wishes. You're not crushed against the weight of trying to meet up with some holier than thou idea of yourself than who you are as a human being. And this is a perfect quote. Sometimes I keep my feelings to myself because it's hard for someone to understand. This is a real key point for those of us who are deep divers, and the crucial aspect is making sure that you pick quality relationships. People with 12th house moons, people who are seeking these kinds of depths, people with 12th house planets, other placements along the chart, people who are seeking depth, it's really important that you make sure that the people you have around you are swimming at that depth with you. Otherwise, what are you doing? You're either trying to rescue them and they don't want to be rescued, or you're being bored out of your mind because they're not going to be challenging you or getting you to the levels you want. So it's really important to be, a boundary is an energetically permeable force that changes based on what our needs are in the moment. And so having healthy boundaries, being able to say no to someone who is ill or that's not the right way to say it, presents a less than ideal way of relating, someone who wants to drag you down, someone who criticizes you all the time, someone who is downright mean to you, anyone who physically abuses you, anyone who talks down to you, these sorts of things. Learning to start to say no to those people and saying no to those relationships then opens up the space for you to begin to bring in people who have a deeper sense of quality and deeper wish of connection, and you can start relating with people in that way. So it's kind of like you have to say no to what doesn't work so that you can say yes to what does work. Because if you don't say no and you just put up with whatever it is that the universe is giving you, then the universe is going to just keep giving it to you. So it's better to be a little bit more discriminating about it. And what if you don't have a 12th house moon? Not everyone has a 12th house moon, not everyone has a 12th house planet, but everyone does have a 12th house sign. And every month, the moon visits that sign for about 2.5 days. So there's each month, every one of us is getting that 12th house activated. And each of us is going to have a moon in that 12th house that's going to be activating us. So what are good ways to nurture that place in your chart? Like I said before, consider the element to find each sign's recharge ability. Water for water, earth for earth, fire for fire, air for air, whatever those different aspects with each. When the moon transits or progresses the 12th house, what aspects does it make to the rest of your planets? Realizing that when the moon progresses into your 12th house, rather than it being a 2.5 day period for a month, it's a 2.5 year period in which that moon is going to be going through your 12th house. And so that can be a very, so that's going to happen every 28 years. You're going to have a 2.5 year period of the moon progressing through your 12th house, and therefore you're going to have that experience of what it's like. And so in those times, it's a really good time for you to recharge yourself and do all the things we've been talking about throughout this talk today. The 77 Moods of Akbar and Jeff, one of my favorite comics back in the day, Matt Groening before he did The Simpsons, actually. And I love this because it's got 77 little sketches with everything from, let's start in the upper left hand, is dismayed, huffy, yearning, jubilant, distraught, seductive, petulant, goofy, moody. And it's the exact same look for each of them, except when you get all the way down to the bottom where he's surprised and his hat's a little bit off his head. It's learning to be in relationship with our moods and learning for us to be, we are the only ones in charge for ourselves. And so being clear and being in control of our moods is really important, because that's what affects our relationships with other people and life in general. And some famous 12th house moon people. Scarlett Johansson has a Scorpio 12th house moon. Oh my God, my mind just went blank on her name. From South Africa, Charlize Theron, Leo, 12th house moon, played the monster. I mean, I don't know if anyone's ever seen that, but just this, I mean, to see someone with this kind of stunning beauty transform herself into this and play that part was really incredible and beautiful. And when you think about that, you know, that shiftability, that mutability of what that 12th house moon can give can really be very interesting. And Scarlett Johansson, she's kick-ass bad. Liberace, Sagittarian, 12th house moon. I mean, kind of really helped for him, right? It made him a very playful performer. It kind of gave him a very optimistic view on life, very playfulness, very, you know, horsey, so to speak, or Centaurian way of looking at things. Billie Holiday, Capricorn, 12th house moon. Beautiful. I'm sure she really needed that. Che Guevara, his quote, "The life of a single human being is worth 1,000,000 times more than all the property of the richest man on earth." 12th house Pisces moon. I mean, of course he'd be believing in communism. Of course he'd believe in that everyone deserves to have everything that's available, because that, you know, a Pisces 12th house moon would be someone who understands that that we all own it. It belongs to all of us. Mila Jovovich, from The Fifth Element, one of my favorite movies of all time. Gemini, 12th house moon. She plays a wide range of characters, and she's got an incredible mutability about her. She's able to pull forth, and a model. I put myself in here, of course, my 12th house moon in Scorpio. Here's Mila Jovovich, 12th house moon in Gemini, about 10 degrees off from her Mars. So it's retrograde. It kind of gives you that kind of a sense of that kind of built up passion within her. And what a great situation here for that moon opposing her Neptune in the 12th house, Pisces, mutual reception. That Neptune, the Neptune rules Sagittarius, and that moon is in the 12th house, so it really feeds it. And, you know, she's really great at creating this imagery, creating this way of presenting herself to different people and morphing into these different things. All that creative Scorpio energy in the 5th house. All right, and I did Liberace's just for fun. Capricorn rising. He was a consummate businessman. He was very intelligent, very adept at how he handled things. So that I would say, and then also too, sorry, it's important to look at who the ruler of the 12th house is. That's going to play out a real important part in it. You know, remember to include the traditional rulers as well as the new rulers. Challenging aspects are going to feel like they come out of nowhere, like in a square, you know, like someone's coming in and T-boning you off, you know, out of the right or left side without even knowing. Or they're looking straight at you like they do with an opposition, so you really have to deal with it. Or it might feel like the individuation is impossible, which is often the case when we deal with conjunctions. And how will you work with how will you work with the wizard moon? And questions or answer time.
Excellent. Thank you, Michael. This is Sarah.
Hi, Sarah. Thank you.
I truly enjoyed that. I don't have the 12th house moon, but I have a 12th house Mars, who is my ruler of my chart. So much of that relates over to the same.
Right.
Yeah.
12th house, you know, the 12th house is I've been really enjoying studying it, because we're very, we're kind of Machiavellian. We like manipulating and shape-shifting and, you know, doing things. And it's really, you know, when you really get to claim that energy, especially when it's a Mars energy for you and it's a ruler of your chart, that's, you know, that's really great, because that's, you know, and esoterically, Mars is one of the planets that's sixth ray of loving devotion. So it's really like kind of being of service to the divine and to your highest good.
Yes. Wouldn't have seen that in my youth, but I can see it now.
Well, you know, with the 12th house Mars, I would imagine that your youth was quite a bit of fun.
Yeah, robust.
That's a good word for it.
Thank you so much. That was a great talk.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah, thanks, Michael. It's Linda here. You said in your presentation, are you projecting your moon needs out onto others or taking responsibility for your own moon? I'd just like your opinion on what's the problem with having like real need for connection with others, emotional need, and especially if, you know, you're sick or something like that, how does that change it?
Well, when I say that, it's more about not, so like, that's why I use the example of kind of like the cat lady, or it's also like someone who goes around and wants to, like, their friends are all not as healthy as them, so then everyone else is the one that is the one who's needy, and therefore there's an excuse not to give to the self. So it's important in that sense, you know, of the individual with that moon there to be able to state, you know, this is what I need, because it's about learning about stating those needs and owning them for ourselves and saying, hey, you know what, I'm not feeling well, and you know, it might be hard for me to call up a friend and say, hey, you know, I'm not feeling well, I need you to come over, you know, can you bring me some soup? That's a challenging thing for someone with a 12th house moon to say, but it's also incredibly rewarding when they realize that the love that they've been sharing and giving out to all these other people actually gets to be given back, because that's what we have to understand with things. There's this flow, and whenever we try to stop something, say no to it, even though I'm not talking about with boundaries here, but saying no to receiving from other people, it stagnates the energy. And so it's really important for us to be able to own that, receive that, and then it also recharges our batteries so that we can also give to other people.
Yeah, that's good. Thank you. Yeah, after all, we are a family, aren't we? The human family. Yeah, thanks.
The more we pay attention to that, and the more we really, and I think, you know, the next 50 years with all the changes in people's, you know, as the melting pot changes and as the color bands change across the world with the population, you know, it's going to be more and more important for us all to really understand that, you know, we are all brothers and sisters. We are all families. We're all God's or the divine one's children, and we have way more in common with one another than we don't.
With the general suppression of emotions, you know, for really quite a very long time, do you feel it's best to show your emotions, or are they more private?
I personally, I mean, I have my moon sextiles my Mars right at the top of my chart. So, I mean, I think I'm probably a little more aggressive and showing that out, so I can kind of understand Sarah's energy with it, because it kind of ties in. But I think it's really important to show the feelings, but it's important to do it with people who, you know, you can be safe doing it with. I mean, you know, you're not going to go, like, if you're a guy, you know, you're not going to go out with your blokes, you know, to a bar and start, you know, sobbing and sharing your feelings of that. You're going to want to find, like, maybe one of your friends who is a little bit more sensitive and say, hey, you know, I've been having a tough time with something, you know, is it okay if I share it with you? But I mean, I think those sorts of things, you know, just the simple act of knowing that your feelings are normal and it's okay to have feelings, I think, are just really important. So finding people who can support that, understand that, and so you can express it, and then hopefully at some point get to the point where you don't have to express it all the time.
Great answer. Thank you very much.
Welcome. All right, Wanda?
Thank you, Michael. This was a awesome talk. I am actually a 12th house moon. I didn't realize that this was going to focus this much on the 12th house. I thought it was more the moon. And but yeah, this was really great. I've kind of, as I've gotten older, learned my no muscle is getting a lot more strengthened.
Which sign is your moon in?
Leo.
Leo, okay. Oh, good, okay. Yeah, so it's interesting because one, I mean, that's kind of the interesting thing is one would think that with a Leo moon that you know, that you're so fierce, right? So what, like, how was it for you? Was it easier for you to kind of like shine the light on other people, so to sense, or like it was okay for, like, how did that play out for you when you were younger?
Well, my mother is a Leo, so the stage was only big enough for her. Just, you know, keeping it real. Wow. So, but I love encouraging, you know, others. I guess I kind of try to do that for others because I didn't get it, you know, myself. My needs didn't matter. I had to stay in the background. So I'm comfortable being behind the scenes and in the background.
Yeah.
And I like, shining that light and encouraging and pushing other people forward.
Yeah. I mean, look at even here on your pictures here on the Zoom, you've got a tile or a painting or something. And so, I mean, that's one thing that is very typical with 12th house moon people, is where it's not comfortable for us to be up front. I think if it wasn't for mine sextiling my Mars with my midheaven, I think it would be a very different experience, especially with Scorpio, because Scorpio wants to kind of like hide under the rocks anyway. But I think the great gift is bringing it all into the light because it's really necessary. Carolyn, did you have any questions or comments or that you wanted to share?
Hi, Michael. I was wondering about planets in the 6th house that are opposite, if you had something in general to say.
Well, I mean, right off the bat, what you're going to experience with anyone who has planets in the 6th house is the transits, each month and throughout the year of the moon and other things playing the oppositional point. And so what would be really interesting is to see what happens when by transit or progression, things come in and play in that opposite place. Who shows up in your life, and do you allow that person, again, because we're talking about projection, does that person then, are they the one who's like the spiritual one and that's like hard for you then to own for yourself? Or is it where you actually are able to step into the place and really being able to own that place for yourself? I mean, I think it would be kind of a long conversation, but I want to see, whatever that dynamic is with that planet, the need of the planet in the 6th is going to be somehow mirrored in that 12th house. And then it's going to get activated in a way that's really going to kind of force things to come to life. And again, remember the 12th house to the 6th house. The 6th house is our health. It's our daily routine. So when something hits on that 12th house and it's activating that 6th house from an oppositional point, it's probably going to show up as maybe a little sickness, soreness in the body, something going on with the body, something in the daily routine that needs to shift and change to allow for a greater sense of oneself to come in.
Interesting. I've really identified with a lot you've said about 12th house moons. I have my progressed moon going through the 12th now. And natally, I have Neptune in the 6th conjunct Hecate conjunct my sun. And yeah, so Pisces is on the cusp of my 12th house. So it's fine. It's fine. I'm just still being a bit of a hermit, and that's fine. And we'll see how that goes. But it was really interesting, Michael. I really like learning from you.
Thanks, Carolyn. I'd say, during this time, I mean, that sounds like a really wonderful opportunity for some great creativity, dream journaling. Enjoy that time with yourself. Really go within. You might find memories coming from some of your ancestors' dream state that comes through. I mean, that sounds like a really gorgeous time, and also maybe like a time for really anchoring, and I know you're a spiritual being, really anchoring and more nurturing yourself from that spiritual place.
Yeah, it's becoming far easier to meditate than it's ever been.
Good. Yeah.
It's like, oh, I'm home. Oh, there are my chakras. Oh, this is wonderful.
Beautiful, beautiful. And I would say water and anything that allows you a sense of expansiveness and a sense of openness right now, just be really, it's kind of like it's a returning home in a sense. And what a great, in esoteric astrology, we say the Neptune veils the moon. And it's, this idea that the moon somehow hides us from that greater sense of ourselves. And so, dive in, experience that, and allow yourself to be transported. That'd be beautiful.
Yeah.
Great.
Thank you very much.
Thank you. Well, thank you, everyone. This has been really a real treasure and a real treat. Thank you so much. I can be reached at michael@coremichael.com, or you visit my website at coremichael.com. And thank you, Wanda and Linda, for the amazing position, the work, the space that you give, and the wonderful energies that you provide for us all doing this. Thank you, Sarah and Carolyn, for joining us today, and the recording will be available shortly. Have a great night.